Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this, the first general meeting of the Watford African Caribbean Association following our annual general meeting. I'd like to welcome in particular our MP, Dean Russell, and our Mayor, Peter Taylor. Welcome both. The way we're going to do this is that I'm going to provide a bit of a context to the conversation. I'm then going to ask Dean to share any thoughts that he has, particularly as it relates to the national picture. And Peter, I'll ask Peter to reflect on more the local situation. We've got Angela Wells, who's with us this evening. And after that, I'm going to ask Angela if she wants to share any observations at that point. And then what we're going to do is open this up to questions, to the sharing of experiences, and for any suggestions as to how we are going to take this agenda forward. So that's kind of what we're going to do. We also want to think about some of the next steps. As far as the normal meeting arrangements goes, we're not going to cover those issues tonight because I don't think this issue is so important and so serious that I think we do need to kind of focus our energies on exploring this to the maximum. We do know, we now know that the census information sorry, I'm just going to share with you, sorry, a sort of what we're little thing about what we're wanting to do. So just a few things. So if you can keep your camera on, I was going to say at the start, do use the raise hand function that we have in place. Please stay on mute if you can, unless you're speaking. What we're going to suggest that we'll deal with the presentations as I've just announced, and what we're then going to do is open it up for questions, conversations, as I say, sharing of experiences. And what we will then do is kind of reflect on whatever is in the chat and so on and so forth. I mean, if you did find that there was something that you urgently wanted to raise, then so long as our speakers are happy to stop in mid-flow, then we'll deal with that. So just some background and context for this. And I was going to say that if you look at the census data from 2021 is beginning to emerge. And what we do know from that is that Watford has got one of the fastest growing population in the region. I think it's gone up by about 13% since 2011. The situation is also one where you could see, just like largely it has been the case across the country, is that has been caused by an increase in the proportion of migrants that we've had. And many of those people will be people from our communities. And if you look at some of what's indicated by the age profile, you can see that actually a lot of the increase is going to be amongst migrants, and going forward, it's likely to be where a lot of the issue will, the increase in our population will arise from. There's no doubt, though, that what we've got in our society, not just here in Watford, is a history of discrimination and unfair treatment. Those of you who were a part of our quiz night the other day will know that since 1965 we had three pieces of race relations legislation before the Equality Act 2010, and they're all emanated from the fact that there was a history of discrimination and unfair treatment that our community has been subjected to. Many years ago, a guy called Ted Cantle was asked by the then Labour government to produce a community cohesion report, which was 2001, which proposed this idea that some of our communities would live in parallel lives, and that, in my view, resulted in even more discrimination taking place, where the victims were then further victimized, and that continues to be the case again. I think most of us have been around to see what's happened with Brexit and the toxicity that's actually that's emanated from that. And our community, again, has not fared well when you think about all of that. And then, of course, we don't have COVID, and I'm not even talking about George Floyd, but we see from the data coming out from that about how our community has been badly impacted by that, and that remains the case. Then we come to the situation that we're in now, where we have a cost of living crisis. And I'm going to touch on some of the recent research that has touched on that shows that our community and the community as a whole is being impacted by it, but the African and Caribbean communities are more likely to be impacted by most than most. I can't fail to mention on what I call an unhelpful report by Tony Sewell that seems to suggest that there is no such thing as institutional discrimination, despite all of the history of decades of discrimination that we've been subjected to, and he's clearly living in some parallel universe. And I mentioned the increase in the Watford population. Since we've arranged this meeting, I've become aware of a piece of work that was done by the Runnymede Trust, and I'm just going to share some of the headlines that are here with you, because I think it's great context to what we are going to be discussing this evening. The report, which will be in the chat later on, around Falling Faster, shows that Black minority ethnic people, we are 2.5 times more likely to be in relative poverty, and 2.2 times more likely to be in deep poverty. There's people who are worried about where the next meal is going to come from, and that's it's more than 50% below what we normally term as relative poverty when we compare that to our white counterparts. So beneath the poverty line, the average income for Black and minority ethnic people is fallen deeper, faster and deeper, by 6 percentage points than those of our white colleagues, which is only fallen by 1% over the last decade. And of course, as I've mentioned, this has all become much more pronounced since we've had COVID-19. Despite the fact that the community in question only makes around 15% of the population of the UK, more than a quarter, 26% of those are in deep poverty. And those from Black and minority ethnic background make up a growing share of those on the lowest incomes. The Black and minority ethnic communities are more than 2.2 likely to be in deep poverty, as I already said. So over the last decade, changes to the tax and social security system have been highly regressive, but also racialized. In real terms, white families now receive £454 less a year on average in cash benefit than they did a decade ago, but this rises to £806 less a year for Black and minority ethnic families, and even higher for Black families. Black and minority ethnic women have been some of the worst affected and currently receive £1,040 less than they did a decade ago. That's just indicative of some of the issues. So these developments have left many Black and minority ethnic households disproportionately exposed to the current cost of living crisis in nominal and relative terms. The energy price guarantee announced earlier this month will lift more, last month as it is now, more white households out of poverty than Black minority ethnic households. As a result, just under 32% of white people are likely to experience first poverty this winter, compared to 52% of Black and minority ethnic people. all of that information I've just shared with you has come from this Runnymede report, which I will put out there for people to have a look at themselves. It has been exposed in the media. In fact, recently, over the last few days, I think none of us could be unaware. It's been on almost every news around the extent to which we've got a problem and a real issue around a cost of living crisis. And I think I think the situation has got even more pronounced since we've set up this general meeting to discuss this issue. So you might say it's an opportune occasion for us to actually raise the issue. And that said, I think it's great that we have with us both Dean Russell and Peter Taylor, who are, you would say, the people locally that we place in a position to assist us in trying to see how we find solutions that are going to be working for us. So I'm actually now going to hand you over to Dean, our MP, to share his own thoughts around these matters with you. Dean, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yes.
Brilliant, excellent. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to address your meeting and to be part of this. Hopefully you've seen over the past 2.5 years, I've been very committed to working with the community and engaged on a local level to not just do volunteering and so on, but actually to listen and hear what the challenges are. And I don't pretend to say that everything is perfect, because it really isn't. And I think there are many ways that we need to increase or decrease racism, but also increase understanding across community groups and work together to embrace and celebrate diversity. And you know, just last week I was fortunate to attend the event in Atria, where we were doing just that, which I think is so important with the One Vision and the Watford Interfaith Association and many other groups. But I know that today is very much about cost of living. So I thought I'd just give some background context to build on the excellent introduction that you gave, Clive, and also to just share some of the actual practical support that is out there. And I'm sure Peter, as Mayor, will also no doubt cover some of these, because often many of a lot of support comes at the council level, and the government often provides the support, and the council obviously do a great job in helping local communities in that. So, I mean, just to give the backdrop, and I can say this with two former hats on, one of which was as the Health and Social Care Select Committee member, where in part, to your point, Clive, about the challenges, especially within health, we looked a lot at discrepancies with health during COVID, especially for the Black community, but also actually one of the reports we did, and I remember it very starkly, was the impact during maternity for Black women, and the saddening rates there in terms of injury and sadly at times death that was affected more for Black women than it was for other groups and ethnicities. And I recall, I can't remember whether we did it in private or whether we did public sessions, but I remember asking a lot of questions at that time on behalf of the community to say, look, how can we fix these problems? How do we solve them? But the reason why I say that is that COVID obviously has a massive impact on where we're at today. The world stopped in many ways, and that then led to massive backlogs, not just in terms of health and the impact that we're seeing today with some of the issues with GPs and even dentists, but also what that meant was that in terms of products and getting products around the world, it stopped a lot of production. We had a massive issue for a good 1.5 years, not just in the UK, but around the world. If you then combine that with the other hat I wore for a while, which was the Parliamentary Private Secretary in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, what we saw there was the role that Putin has played behind all of this. And we were, as a world, coming out of COVID, and then especially Europe has been massively impacted by the evil actions that he's had in Ukraine. And what that has meant effectively is it affected gas prices very heavily. And then globally, you then combine that with the fact that there is very much a global issue monetarily, economically at the moment. No country's been free from the the damage of that. The US has been hit, a place like Germany and so on. So we're in this position in the UK where people are on the ground feeling the effects of very major, unprecedented at times, global impacts and global challenges. What that means now is that the government in many ways is trying to find ways to support people, especially over the winter period up until April, at which point there'll be new measures announced, well, before then actually, but before April, about how can we actually help people on the ground. And in particular, one of the key things that was very much coming through, as we all are aware of, is the impact on energy bills, not just for individuals, but as businesses as well. And so that's why the energy price guarantee was announced. And I just thought I'd walk you through some of the measures that are within that. Now, you've got, I'll talk about the big picture numbers, and then I'll go into some of the details to reassure members on this group of what's actually available to individuals as well. So from a big picture perspective, government spending around £60 billion on capping the unit cost of energy this year. If you break that down, there's lots of other areas where money's being spent. So the energy price guarantee is around £31 billion that's going in to support people. The energy bill relief scheme is £29 billion. The energy bill support is about £12 billion. I can gladly share this afterwards, by the way. Cost of living payments around £9 billion. National insurance rates from the reversal recently, although I do appreciate the fact that I voted for the increase in the first place, so I wouldn't want to I did it for the right reasons, which is just to help health and social care, but that's £7 billion. National insurance thresholds increase, so changing the level at which people have to pay the national insurance, another £6 billion. Council tax rebate, £3 billion. Fuel duty cut, £2 billion, and then other initiatives around £2 billion. What that means on the ground, so for anyone who's on this call who is looking at where they can best get support, there are various ways that affects on the ground in terms of individuals. So there's a £400 off energy bills for all households. All of these have been announced, by the way. So, and none of these, unless it's been announced to be, require somebody to ask for them. So one thing I would just like to say, actually, before I go through these, there's the big concern I have is there's a lots of scammers out there at the moment, and lots of people getting texts saying, click here to get your money from the government, click here to get your rebate, and so on. Often, well, undoubtedly unsolicited messages. And so I would say to everyone on this Zoom, be wary of any texts or any messages you get via email asking you to fill out a form or to go and ask for a rebate. Invariably, they are being applied automatically. And if they weren't, you'd get official information through. You wouldn't just get a text from the government. And I know some people sadly have been caught out by those scams, and they're very sophisticated. So just to say that before I start. But so in terms of support that's been announced during the past year, so £400 off energy bills for all households, as I mentioned, £650 payments for households receiving means tested benefits. So that means if you take pensioners, for example, they'll get an additional £300, people receiving disability payments another £150, an additional £150. There's a £150 council tax rebate for households in council tax bands A to D. There's the 5p cut to fuel duty. And what I would say with that as well, there has been, because I was conscious that many people didn't feel that cut when it came in. And there was analysis in a report recently to see whether petrol stations were actually passing that on. To date, it looks like they were, but I'm already noticing that the fuel is coming down slowly. And again, there's lots of global impacts and forces at play with that. And then also an increase in the amount someone can earn before national insurance contributions are charged. So that lifted many people out of the need to pay any tax on national insurance at all. There's lots of other things. I'm conscious of not taking up too much time, but what I would say is that from a purely Watford-centric perspective, there's lots of work that's going on. I know the council do a lot of work to engage with local communities as well. For me, there's no politics involved here. This is about how can we support each other. I know that the charities locally do incredible work. Many of you, and Clive, I know you're very active as well, and actually across all political divides. I often say that we often work together to help people with deliveries and products, and and services and so on to volunteer. And I think that's one of the really strong bits that we've got in Watford, is that we do put people first, I think, and help support each other practically. But also one thing I would say is that if you take organisations like the Citizens Advice Bureau, they do incredible work. I volunteered and did a very short shift, the Citizens Advice in Watford just a few weeks ago, and they really help deal with a wide array of issues. You know, they may not always be able to get the solution, but they definitely work to be able to signpost. And then finally, I'd just say that as a member of Parliament, you know, one of the roles I have is very much around casework. So if you were to look at the past 2.5 years, I think my team and I have completed about, I think, 18,000 pieces of casework, something in that sort of area. And that's everything from somebody who potentially is worried about getting evicted through to someone who's having issues within the hospital, whether it be cost of living issues, just guidance on what policy and support is out there. So what I would say to anyone, again, on this group is, if you are in trouble or you do need support, don't leave it too late. You know, ask for help early. Feel free to email me. It's dean.russell.mp@parliament.uk. We can share that. I'm sure hopefully, Clive, you could share that. But if you just search for Dean Russell online, you'll find my website with details. And if you contact me, then usually we can at least signpost to the right information or to the guidance or to support that's out there. But the main thing I would say is that don't leave things till it's too late. Ask for help if you're worried. Ask for support if you're worried. I think you'll find that across Watford we really do work together. So don't feel that, you know, just because you're perhaps a Labour voter, you shouldn't reach out to a Conservative MP, or just because you're a Conservative voter, you shouldn't reach out to a Lib Dem councillor. You know, we're there to help. We were elected not because of our party necessarily, although that might be why we might have won the election in our various guises, but we're there to serve you. We are at your public servants, and so we're there to help. So if you need support, reach out to us. We'll do our best to advise you, and I'm hopefully speaking on behalf of anyone else on the call who's a councillor as well. But if you need that support, reach out. And of course, I totally get there'll be lobbying and people wanting us to go faster and further in different ways from a government perspective and all those things. I hear that, and I'm very aware of different points of view, but this isn't really about politics. This is about how do we help people on the ground, and there's lots of support out there. The cost of bills, especially with the cap on the usage rates, as it were, on the tariffs, should make a big difference to families. But also, if you run a business and you're worried, feel free to reach out. But again, you should get a lot of support, and especially if you're a small business. I'm very aware of the worries on energy prices. So again, there is lots of support out there, but not everyone's always aware of it. And beyond that list I gave, there's lots of stuff that you will just get. But people are often amazed when they write to me and ask that they're struggling with something, how many other grants and schemes and support mechanisms are there. So I'm conscious I'll probably talk for too long there, but I would just say, you know, if you're worried, please contact someone, get support. There's lots of support, £60 billion coming from government. That's being rolled out through the energy companies, obviously councils and so on. There's lots of arguments about what could be done differently, but I think where we are at the moment, there's lots of support to help people on the ground. If you need support, reach out. If you are happy to volunteer with a local organisation, do that, because that can be very helpful as well. And also, you know, if you want to keep in touch with myself and others to find out what's going on in the local area and help that's there, there will definitely be information available and provided to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dean. If people can actually put their questions in the chat, and I noticed that I know Marilyn has already put your contact details in.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Dean. I know I have a couple of questions that I want to put to you, Dean. I'm sure other people do too, but we are going to pick those up once we've heard from Peter, and we've heard what Angela would want to say or contribute at this point in time. So, as I say, put any thoughts in the chat. I suggest you do it now, because actually you might forget what it is you want to ask. So just write it in there now, so we'll pick them up in due course. So I'm going to hand you over to Peter to talk about the picture from that local perspective. Peter.
Thanks very much, Clive, and thanks again for hosting this evening's event. I think it's a really important one. I'll do my best not to repeat what Dean was saying there, with lots of the stuff that's happening nationally as well. And just to forewarn you, there was a fireworks display happening about 10 meters outside my window here. So if suddenly you start hearing lots of banging, that's why. I think with all of this, it's sometimes you can kind of get caught up in lots of the statistics and the different things. And for me, actually, it's all about the individuals. And I remember chatting with Jenny Pattinson, one of our councillors, actually 18 months ago, before all of the cost of living got as bad as it has. And she was a governor at Parkgate Primary School, which many of you will know, just in North Watford. And she was telling me that one of the issues that the people working at lunch times there and the teachers were dealing with was many children arriving at school with packed lunches, but in the packed lunch box was pretty much nothing, and them having to quietly fill them up. So and I think there's lots of people in the town who perhaps aren't the very poorest or entitled to free school meals, but are just about managing, the sometimes referred to. And I know that in recent months, those kind of issues have become even more acute. I've set up a group in Watford, the cost of living group, that includes the Citizens Advice and the Job Centre and many other people involved right on the front line. And our last meeting happened yesterday, and the Citizens Advice produced their statistics showing the amount of work that they're doing in Watford. And of course, I agree with Dean, they're doing brilliant work, but the amount of people approaching them has obviously escalated. So compared to a year ago, they're doing 48% more than they were the equivalent period last year. And it's not an even picture. So the things that are going up the most, no great surprise, credit card debt has gone up by 88%. The amount of people approaching them on debt issues has gone up by 73%. One of the things that I found really interesting about their analysis was it also did it by across Watford, different areas, how it's responded. So the area in Watford that's had the biggest increase about people approaching the CAB is Legates in North Watford, the Hare Breaks estate, lots of people approaching them. Vicarage in West Watford is the second biggest increase of all the wards in the town. And of course, both Legates and Vicarage are very diverse in terms of the ethnicity of the residents that live in those parts of Watford. So, you know, it was interesting context you set at the start, Clive, and I don't dispute for a moment that there are a number of, you know, factors that affect this. In terms of what are we doing in Watford, I think the first thing is about coordination. So one of the strengths of Watford is the number of organisations, excuse me, and charities that we have in the town, but making sure that we're all working together. So this week, as well as the cost of living group, we had an event at the Job Centre, the DWP on Exchange Road, again bringing together lots of people like the Housing Association and New Hope and others to talk about the support that is available from those organisations. And that was targeted at people that are in particular financial need, and they had hundreds of people turn up to that, and it was really a success. And I think it's important that we work together because, of course, we make more of an impact that way. I put in the chat the council's main link to our cost of living pages, and that has lots of information about the support that's available. So if you just go onto watford.gov.uk, you'll see straight around our homepage the link to that, and there's a wealth of information. I mean, some of the things are quite surprising. So I was approached by the RSPCA, for example, to say that people that have got pets, many of them are talking about the cost of keeping pets, and there's a concern that you'll have a lot of stray animals. And so again, there's information, for example, on that. It just shows the breadth of information that's available. But I'm also conscious that not everyone is on the line and uses technology as much as I do. So the council magazine will be coming out in the next couple of weeks, and that'll feature heavily. The main thing in there will be about cost of living and support available. But also doing those one-to-one sessions. So I talked about the one at the Job Centre, but there'll be others planned. So we're talking about having one, for example, at our shopping centre, Atria, many of you will call it the Harlequin. And so that should be happening in the next few weeks as well, because I think having those face-to-face conversations with people is actually really important at the moment. I'm just going to talk about two other things and then really happy to have a discussion and answer questions. So One is about warmer places, as they're called, or we're calling them welcoming spaces. I know lots of councils are looking at that, and we are doing that as well. These are places that people can come to, obviously with fuel bills being high. I think it's quite important that these places are attractive to people, that there's no stigma, that it's somewhere that, you know, it feels like an enjoyable place to be. And so one of the things we're making sure is that there are activities in these places, that there's, you know, if you're asking people to stay there for a long period of time, that there's refreshments, there's meals. I mean, these have started opening. So the Salvation Army on St Albans Road have one now that in the evenings for Homework Club. They also have people working from home on a Thursday can go there. But there's going to be a website that will be launched probably this weekend, in fact, that has got about 25 of these across Watford at different times. So working out of community centres, places like the West Watford Community Centre or the Meriden Centre, and having times when that's open, but also activities for people to do and things that, so it's a pleasant experience for people. And Dean and I have often talked about issues around mental health and loneliness, and actually this could be a positive thing, actually, that it brings people together in those environments to make new connections. Part of the funding for that, so during COVID we had the community appeal, and a lot of the funding obviously went to COVID related initiatives. That's now being very much focused on cost of living, so money will be allocated to groups to fund those activities and the food and refreshments and these places. If you are going to the fireworks in Casterbury Park tomorrow, please take some change with you, because the buckets that we're rattling, half the money will go to the Watford Community Appeal, and other money will go to other local charities and good causes. I could talk for ages about the stuff that we're doing. I think the main thing to say is that there is a lot of work going. I'm under no illusions about the scale of the challenge. For me, as the leader of Watford Council, it's the #1 issue at the moment that we've got to respond to. All of the money that the government gives us, we obviously get out to people and target that as quickly as we can. The one benefit that I think people don't, there's a very low take up of, which you don't get automatically, which always is worth emphasising, is pension credit. So nationally, about a third of people entitled to pension credit don't receive it. And I think sometimes people think, oh, you know, I'm not sure that I'm entitled. It's you know, it's something that people that deserve to receive if they're entitled to it, but you don't get it automatically. And so part of what we'll be doing is encouraging all the residents who are entitled to pension credit to make those claims and to receive that money that they're entitled to. And there'll be a lot of communication directly to those people, because we know the people who are entitled to it and who aren't receiving it, and making sure that they're targeted with letters and all the rest of it, and emails to make sure to encourage them to receive money that they're entitled to. I'll finish there, Clive, if that's okay.
Sorry, thank you very much, Peter. Sorry, I muted myself and I needed to unmute. Thank you very much for that overview. I'm sure we're going to have some questions. I've got one or two myself that you may be able to address in due course. But Angela, you've been working in this area. I know Peter and Dean have both mentioned the Citizens Advice Bureau, and I know you volunteered with them for quite a while. Any initial thoughts about what you've heard so far, Angela, that you want to share with us?
Yes, I've been working with the CAB for 13 years. And I have to say that it's one of the places that you feel comfortable in going in. There's no discrimination. Everybody has to be treated equally. Otherwise, it certainly isn't the place for an advisor to be. I was so pleased that Dean mentioned, he's the first to mention the CAB, because I've heard politicians not mention, they talk about the energy problem, and they haven't mentioned as to where to get help. If you fall into difficulties with bills, energy is one of the priority debts. And if you fall into that problem, then the first port of call is your energy supplier. That's where you go. You let them know what the difficulties are, and they've got a duty to work with you. If you weren't getting any assistance there, then the CAB. You go there and they would help you, and they would negotiate with the company so that you can pay what you're able to pay. However, you got to bear in mind that you will be in debt. And once you've negotiated, then that becomes the order. If you fail that, then the whole amount then becomes payable. There's help out there, and you also must understand that you've got to go to the help. The help is not going to come to you. It is there. There are numerous benefits apart from pension credit that's not being taken up. And there is that feeling, especially among us, that they would know our business and all that. If you go to the CAB, your business goes nowhere. It's highly confidential. It remains, as I told clients, in between the four walls, doesn't go anywhere. Now, the benefits are out there. When you go to the CAB, the point is that looking at where you are, what you've got, your income, your outgoings, looking at the benefit check to see whether there are any benefits out there that you're able to claim to help you out. And among those benefits, there is the people who are on low income, there is a reduction in council tax, reduction in housing benefit. There are loads of others, those who are sick. There's the employment support allowance, there's personal independent payments, there's disability living for children if the children are ill, there's attendance allowance for the over 65, there is carers allowance, then you have your blue badge, you have free prescription, you've got universal credit, and if you're there, you have to be over the age of 18 and over, and you're not receiving state pension. If you live in the UK, you must have no more than £16,000 in order to receive it. So there are some specifications. There's also help with mortgages if you fall into that curve. So there's a host of benefits out there that a lot of people do not collect. Put your shoe on, take your handbag up, not the men. Off you go to the CAB and get the help you need. It's all there for you. Pension credit was mentioned, and I firmly believe the reason pension credit isn't taken up is the kind of information they have to give. And people get a little bit scared when they have to give what the savings are, and all that sort of thing. They do usually get, so you find it, and then it's to be done every year. So I think it's a little bit harsh there. However, those are the rules. So that's I think what I've got to say, because I don't want to take up too much time. You also have the benefit of, if you want to go online, go on to Citizen Advise, and you can do a benefit calculation for yourself. However, if you did not want to do that, the Citizen Advice Bureau would gladly do that for you. And they would also do a better off benefit if you are on benefits, to see if you took a job, whether you are going to be better off or worse off, so that you know what you're getting yourselves into. So those are what I have to say. If there's anything else, you can come back later and ask whatever question you would like to ask.
Thank you very much, Angela, for that. Really helpful contributions. And if anybody's in any doubt about any of these things, Angela hasn't just been invited as a specialist. She's one of our members who has that kind of experience and is very willing to help. We don't want to overload her too much, but I know that if help is needed, she's willing to provide it. So people shouldn't suffer without seeking the sort of assistance that might be available. But we do know that actually often, despite even having this meeting, people don't know about this meeting, information out there, people don't get that information. And I know there are some questions been put out there. So Angela, you wanted to come back on that?
Yes, I forgot to mention one amount of money to come. The winter fuel payments, that's now been sent out, and the amount given to people, I think 65, it's £500. And those that are a bit older, they're going to get £600. And as Dean mentioned, you are going to be notified by letter, not by email, not by text, but a letter is going to come to you telling you that that money is going to be on its way. And if you must have received it by January the 23rd. So look out for it, it's on its way.
I the only thing I'd say to that Angela, is you said 65, where it's now 66, but
Well, you know, it's all right. The ladies will prefer to be 65.
yeah, yes, indeed, but you won't get it until you're 66. However, look, there are some questions out there, and I've got some too, but should we sort of see if we can have a look at the questions that are there before I go into asking the ones that and others might have. And if anybody wants to put their hand up, then just put your hand up and we'll come to you. Now I see, okay, so just, can somebody help me out with the questions?
There's one that Peter has already answered. So somebody was asking, can council tax costs be spread over 12 months instead of 10? So Peter Taylor has answered that and said yes, you can request it.
Stick a pin there. Peter, can you just explain though, how does it work generally? Because as a resident, I've generally paid on 10 installments. Personally, I quite like the idea of having two months when I can have a bit more money, and particularly as the council tax is not cheap. I have a few more pounds in my pocket I can spend on something else. But I noticed you said in there that you can actually do, you can negotiate, you can make arrangements.
Yeah, I have heard of cases. So when people are struggling financially and they wish to do that, that can be arranged. It's I'm not sure why it's 10 months. I know it's the same, I think, for pretty much every council, and it's perhaps to do with the software, the history of it. I mean, the other thing just to point out, of course, that of every pound in council tax you spend, I think it's 86p goes out to the county council, the police and crime commissioner. So when we change these, it's not just that it affects Watford council, obviously it affects the county and also the police and crime commissioner. But yeah, many people quite like it, as you say, Clive, because you get the kind of 2 months without paying just before it's summer holidays and everything else. So but for those people, it's a good question from Valerie. Those people who want it to be paid over 12 months, you can make that request to our Revs and Bands team, and that can be arranged. And as Dean said, if there's ever any problems, you know, obviously you can approach Dean, or you can very much for these kind of issues approach me, and it's just the mayor at watford.gov.uk. I'll put it in the chat. I'm very happy to take up these issues as well.
Peter, just one further point though. So you did associate that with people struggling. So if I'm not struggling, but I would really prefer to just have this across the 12 months, so I can just request that too.
I think so, yeah. I'd have to double check. As I say, it's not something that kind of gets raised with me frequently, but I know that I have had cases in the past where it has, people have made it 12 months rather than 10.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And I think Joe has got a question down here. Marilyn, I don't know if Joe wanted to ask the question.
Yeah, Joe has said he can't speak because the baby is sleeping, but he said, I'll read it out in full. Firstly, can I say a massive thank, this is from Joe Innes. Firstly, can I say a massive thank you to Dean, Peter and Angela for joining and for the work that you are doing to support the people of Watford. He says, my question is, how much outreach is being undertaken to find people who are struggling but are unaware or unable to seek help?
That's kind of linked to the point I was making a moment ago about the fact that some people don't get to hear about these things, and therefore the term hard to reach is not what we tend to use any longer, but sort of there are people out there we should be connecting with. So I don't know who wants to go first, and sort of Dean, you wanted to come in first.
Shall I come in first if nobody else is going?
Dean, I think is just unmuting.
Okay.
Dean, you're muted.
Brilliant, thank you. Sorry, I lost the power to speak, which I think most people would love to do that to me most of the time. So well done. That's fantastic. So in terms of outreach, I think in the first part, brilliant organisations like you've got here. And the work you're doing, Clive, is helping spread the word. I think this, it's always the case that, you know, it's often for politicians, we'll know during the election, we'll have put a Leave Victory someone's door 5 times, and then the 6th time you knock, they say that we never hear from you. And the reality is, it's a perpetual, constant thing of trying to sort of remind people of what's available and that stuff is there. I think in terms of outreach, I know there's some fantastic local charities and organisations that are out there doing that work and trying to spread the messages. I think there's a very good argument to say perhaps we should have more consistency in terms of what everyone is saying. It's very hard to do that with different groups, but I know the charities and volunteers on the ground in Watford are exemplary, but perhaps there's a good argument to say, could we give them more consistent language to use so that they know where to point people. I think the other part as well, though, is these sorts of joined up activities, you know, with me here, the mayor, I know Marilyn, obviously fantastic, well, fantastic in many ways, but obviously a brilliant councillor as well, you know, so I think it's about how do we join those dots. But the reality is, sadly, and I think the truth of it is, if we're totally honest about it, people don't necessarily just listen to politicians. And I think that's where people like yourself, Clive, and Angela, who do brilliant work on the ground, just everyone you meet in every interaction where it's appropriate, is to just remind people that this stuff is there and that they should email their MP or email the mayor or email their councillor to ask for help. And I think also it's a bit like the mental health work that goes on. You know, Marilyn very kindly is one of the volunteers who does the training on my mental health initiative, and hopefully she'll agree with this. But it's like with mental health, people won't necessarily come to you with the problem or be very open about it. So often it's about, with mental health first aid, for example, and mental health first aid awareness, it's about being able to listen and sort of understand the cues of why someone might be struggling and then signposting them to the right places. And so I think I would just say for anyone on this group, you know, check your friends, you know, check in on them. How are they doing? Very similar to the way we did during the lockdown in the pandemic. You know, if you haven't heard from someone for a while, perhaps just give them a call or knock on their door, check how they're doing. I think one of the things that was very clear during COVID, actually during the lockdown, was that I know when going out delivering bags of shopping to places, is that you'd walk up to the door of what would seem a very grand house and perhaps even a nice car on the drive, but the people behind the door were perhaps asset rich but cash poor. And so they needed that help with that bag of shopping, they needed that advice. And so I think just be mindful that the people who are struggling aren't necessarily, it's not necessarily going to be obvious that that's the case. And then finally, because I'm conscious I'm probably taking too long, but I would also say that for anyone who's on this group or knows anyone on this group who perhaps is struggling, you don't need to be embarrassed that you've perhaps got into debt because of this, or perhaps the echo effects of the pandemic. Don't be embarrassed to ask for help, because I think there's often a shame involved with being in debt or struggling or perhaps not being able to help your kids. And you don't need to be on your own. You don't need to try and get through this on your own. One of the key reasons why we're in this situation is because an evil dictator in Russia has invaded a foreign country and is killing people in the most atrocious and awful way. The pandemic caused utter devastation. Many of the reasons why this is happening should not be some reason why somebody at home feels like it's their fault that they're struggling. You know, they should never feel that. You know, the community is there to help. The funding in most part is there. I appreciate not everything's going to help everyone as much as they could or would like. I get that, but always reach out, always help. And as Angela mentioned about the Citizens Advice Bureau, they provide amazing support. But to answer the question, I think it's on all of us to make sure we do as much as we can to let people know. There are lots of communication campaigns. The government has lots. I know the council, clearly there's a magazine going out, lots of work, and also for us to talk about it. But the more actually we can do word of mouth on the ground, the better. I hope
that's helpful. The only thing I would say is that actually, as much as what's happening in Ukraine might have an impact, the whole issue of the inequities that we face has nothing whatsoever to do with that particular matter. And that's a real concern for us, that actually, yeah, we're all suffering, but actually some of us suffering more, and it's got nothing whatsoever to do with what's happening in Ukraine.
I hear you. Just on that, I hear you, and I totally get it. And I like to think, so I try and do my best to really help improve awareness of diversity. And I'm very proud to be a signatory for the Nelson Mandela Memorial book for the work that I've done around anti-racism. So I totally hear you. I think that I totally get that. Often people within, especially within the Black Afro-Caribbean community, are in those statistics of the people who are in the lowest levels that therefore are being hit the most by this. I totally get that. But I do think there's an element of how do we best get that communications across. And I think that's probably a bigger conversation, but totally, I think it's an important need to tackle that every day, not just wait for a crisis.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Peter, and then Angela.
Yeah, thanks, Clive. And it's a really good question, Joe. So thank you for it. I hope you're enjoying fatherhood. Just a few things to say from me. Sorry, just got a visitor. The first is that I think it's important to target those places that are where we know there's particular deprivation. So that I was talking about, affects everybody. We have got actually very detailed statistics on areas in the town where there's particular need, and we do have. Part of the work that came out of COVID is community work, people who work at the council who are embedding themselves. I think taking back one of them in the council, in the community, and going out there, meeting groups, meeting faith and community groups, and getting the message out as much as we can face to face and targeting particular demographics. Working, for example, with groups like the Portuguese Association, the Polish, there's lots of national groups, and also the literature that we're doing, it's not just in English, but making it available in languages for those people who might have English as an additional language. As I mentioned before, there's lots going through doors, but people that live in Watford, there's lots of things that come through our doors. And also, I think we can get bombarded sometimes by stuff on social media. So I'm very conscious that the face-to-face conversations are important as well. As I said, we have had stalls that are in places like Hearts Pride and at the job centre, and there was an event in Canterbury Park for the Nigerian community. There was a stall there. So we're doing things like that as well. I'm really conscious that those people most in need are often the people that are the most difficult to reach and the least kind of willing to access the support. So we can't be passive in this, and we've got to be out there. And I'll be knocking on doors tomorrow morning, and I'm sure lots of the politicians will be doing that. And it's not about collecting voting data at the moment. It's about finding out how people are doing and signposting support to people in need. So there is lots of work going, but I would always welcome suggestions from people like you, Joe, and anyone else on this call about what more we can do to reach people that need support.
Thanks, Peter. Angela, and then I know, Amadou, you got your hand up, so we'll come to you next. Angela, you wanted to come in.
Yes, I know that for a fact that the surgeries are now promoting it, because another hat I wear is a member of the Patient Pacifican Steering Group. So they're promoting the CAB so that if there's a problem, they can be steered onto that. The media is also doing it. At court, sitting as a magistrate, it was done there as well. So, and word of mouth, by getting people to understand that they are there and they can assist. And as it has been said, there are lots of people who their pride, they feel that that's not the place for them. But indeed, it is the place for you, and it is the place where you will get whatever you go there, even is to find out where the nearest library is. We have to give you an answer or steer you in the pathway that you would be able to get assistance. So yes, that's the way we say.
Thank you, Angela. I think the thing probably to emphasize, though, is that we are citizens, we pay our taxes like everybody else. And these things that are there to support us are there as an entitlement for all of us too. I think the question of pride has been raised a few times, and yes, we do have this kind of feeling that probably if we seek to access these support that might be there, that it might be a sign of weakness. But actually, if we're in need, let's just make sure we take advantage of the opportunities that are available there to support us, because actually we pay our taxes. and actually we're the people who don't get away much with not paying our taxes, you know. So please bear that in mind. Amadou, you wanted to ask a question, but you need to unmute first. Amadou, are you there? Okay, you need to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Clive. Thank you, everyone, for today's session. I have a question, really, which is directed probably at everyone but Angela, because it's not within her gift or remit. But it's a question to do with this energy price guarantee. When it came about, it was meant to last 2 years.
Yeah.
Now we realize that there's a sunset clause, so that will only last until April or March, actually. So we have all these figures being bandied around today, but nothing is being said about what will come in its place. So have you got any answers for those of us that are feeling that 2,500 added onto our bills from next April onwards is something that will sink us all? That's my question, really.
Dean, I think that's a question for you.
Yeah.
You're muted, Dean. Sorry, you're still muted.
There we go. Right. Okay. Yeah. So it's a really great and a very important question. The thing to note is that what's happening over the next 6 months is looking to see how to best target the support. So, you know, I was very supportive of the 2-year plan originally, and I know that gave a lot of relief. Where the government's at now, and there'll be an announcement, there'll be a new sort of budget. I don't know whether it's called an official budget or not in a few weeks' time, but that will be part of looking at how we look forward. I suppose the key thing is that at the moment, there's still lots of fluctuations with gas prices, fuel prices, there's lots of changeable factors. And so it isn't a case of, there hasn't been any announcement to say in April it's just going to stop. It's more about looking at what will then come in April. And I know there's a lot of push, including from myself, to make sure we make that announcement and what's going to happen as soon as possible to give reassurance to people and to be able to plan forward. But a lot of it is about how do we make sure that the support is going to be there properly from April moving forward, that is affordable, that's sustainable, but also helps people in the best possible way. So it's not a case in my understanding at the moment that it's going to be a cliff edge, no support's going to be there. It's just about what does that look like and what can we do that really will work and can be afforded. Because if you think about the amount of money that's being spent on this just currently, we're talking like £60 billion. We spent 400 billion on the pandemic. That had a massive impact on the economy overall. And we needed to do that to support people. And all the Chancellor's saying is, look, we need to look at what this will look like long term so we can really help people, but also make it so that we don't then have further issues with the economy. So I know that isn't much reassurance because I'm not telling you the details, but once we know the details, obviously get those out there. But the plan is to make sure that there's the best possible support. The Chancellor and the Prime Minister both talked about the fact that they want to do this compassionately to help the people who are struggling the most. But what that looks like has got to be based on what's really worked. And again, we can learn from that over the next few months to see where has this really worked to help people. Because the other part of this is we could end up saying in the next few months, actually, this hasn't reached the people who really needed the support. And actually, did certain groups not need the money that other groups could have perhaps been helped a bit more? So we've got to get it right. And of course, the other big challenge is that, or the big change is that the weather will be very different by April next year. And we're currently going into the winter period where energy usage is much higher anyway. If we have a mild winter, there might be this might have less impact on fuel prices. If we have a very harsh winter, that could have a really dramatic impact on how much energy prices go up or bills go up. So it's just about looking realistically about what can be done, if that helps reassure you.
Amadou, if you wanted to come in, I've got a follow-up to that, but I don't know if you wanted to come back in. You're muted, Amadou.
Thanks.
You're muted.
Can you hear me, Clive?
We can now, yes.
Yeah, thank you for the answer. But I think for me, context matters. We know that the last fiscal event brought us where we are. So I hear the Chancellor talking about making savings of 50 billion. So I'm not getting assurances from you that actually, if we're talking about making savings, this would not be a casualty of that effort to save money. And I know you're talking about waiting until April, but from what I can see going on, it doesn't look like it's going to be good. So are you able to paint a picture that's any different from my observation of things, really? That's what I'm asking.
No, I understand where you're coming from. I mean, I don't have a fly on the wall in the Chancellor's office, but what I would say is that, you know, that one of the key things that we've done, including during the pandemic, is make sure we've supported people often on the lowest incomes and in the most difficult situations. So I don't think it's a case of saying that they will recoup, the government will try and recoup money by not helping people through the energy crisis. It's more about how do we look at the bigger picture. And I appreciate the point about the fiscal event, but you know, the large majority of the issues we're facing come from global challenges, and it's about how do we best make sure we shore up the economy to be able to deal with that. But I think that probably goes a bit off piste of the discussions we're having. But what I would say is that, you know, there's nothing that I've heard so far that indicates that we're going to not try and support people in best way that we can. But I can't give you a guarantee of what that will look like, because I don't know myself. And until the Chancellor does his budget or whatever phrase it will be called in the next few weeks, it'd be wrong of me to try and guess what's in that. But I know that both the Chancellor and the Prime Minister have talked about making sure that we're compassionate in our approach.
I want to move on, Dean, but just on that point briefly, a lot of people were encouraged to buy their own homes. What we've seen recently is a significant increase in mortgage rates. And if you're not in a fixed rate, you're in a really difficult position right now. Not all of those people are wealthy people. And all of that with the increase in anticipated worry about what is going to happen in April is itself not good for people's mental health. So I suppose the question for you, if nothing changes, what will be your position come March with respect to maintaining this kind of support?
So I think there's two parts there. First of all, it's not a case that in April the announcement will be made. As I understand it, the announcement will come way ahead of then. So we'll have a clear idea of how this will play out. But I can't guess on what that will look like, and it'd be wrong of me to do so. You know, I've been very supportive throughout the past 2 years of trying to make sure we've got support in place for people. I was very supportive for the furlough scheme and many other schemes. So in a way, I'm in a similar position as many of you to wait and see what that's going to look like. And I will, as always, behind the scenes, make it very clear that I'm keen that we best support the people who are most in need, absolutely wholeheartedly. And I think, to be honest, you know, the fact that we've spent £60 billion of taxpayers' money, that's your money, you know, to support people is an indication of the direction to make sure that we're helping people. But I think as a taxpayer, you also want to make sure that that's working. And if over the next few months it looks like this isn't actually helping the people who need it most, and actually there's people who didn't need it, then I think it would be right to say we need to review it and make sure that it's working properly. So I think my take is it's a bit of a pragmatic view of saying, let's see how this goes, but also as early as possible, way before April, announce what that next package would look like and what that support would be. And I will always argue to say, look, we need to support people the best way we can, but we also need to be realistic about the global challenges around inflation. And in terms of mortgages, you know, I think we might be going a bit off tangent a little bit, but what I would say is that, you know, the Bank of England is an independent body, and it sets interest rates at the level that it wants to set interest rates, and so the government has no control over that. But what it can be impacted by is the wider economic landscape, and we could probably spend a lot of time talking about politics, about what works and what doesn't, and OBRs and all these things. But ultimately, you know, the goal is to make sure that we're supporting people as best we can, but also enabling the economy to get to a place of growth.
Okay, thanks. Peter, did you want to come in about this particular matter?
Yeah, just very briefly, if that's okay, Clive, just a couple of things. I used to teach economics, and I'll do my best not to sound like an economics teacher, but just to say that, I mean, the inflation rate is actually higher for people, people on the lowest incomes, because of course, food is a bigger proportion of their income. And the point that you just made about interest rates, people on lower income tend to have variable rate mortgages, far more likely than people on higher incomes. So when the Bank of England put up interest rates as they did this week, it has a bigger impact on homeowners that are on lower incomes by and large. I think the £2,500 energy price cap has been quite poorly explained. I think one of my big concerns is that a lot of people, because you use the word cap, they think that's the maximum. They think no one's going to pay more than £2,500 for their energy. It's going to be the average. That's going to be, because of the government intervention, what the average household will pay. Many people in Watford will pay more than £2,500 for their energy bills. And one of my concerns is that when the fuel bills come in and people start actually having more than that, it'll become as a bit of a surprise for some people, which is a worry of mine. I won't get too political. I do think the bigger oil and gas companies should be paying more towards all of this. Even the chief executive of Shell thinks so. But one of the things I do want is more home insulation, and the council, whenever there's government schemes to support insulating homes, we immediately get on the case and are the first in line to be part of those and work with residents to reduce the fuel bills longer term.
Thank you very much. Just an allied question that I would ask, and Dean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think it relates to a government position too, because actually one of the things we've been learning this week on the media is the amount of older people who are in serious poverty despite having pensions. And there is this question that is out there around the pension triple lock, and a decision to be made about that. And I think that decision is going to impact on quite a lot of people's lives. What will be your position, Dean, if that comes up in the Commons for debate regarding whether or not to retain the triple lock? You're muted still.
Sorry, just to be clear, I'm not the one who unmutes me, so I'm not being difficult, I promise. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm waiting to see what comes out. So it's very hard for me to talk about hypothetical, because we need to make sure that the economy is in a strong place. I know that there was a pause on the triple lock for a year when the economy needed it to be. You know, I'm very keen for it to stay in place, but I need to see what the package is, and I'd be, I think, rather a naive politician to be on the call stapling my particular position without knowing what all the context is and what's going to come out. So I think the main thing is that we've got, as I say, an awful lot of support for older people, and also a lot of support for cost of living around this that's available. So I don't want to sort of end up into a sort of political discussion about one way or the other, because there's always challenges on this and always difficult decisions. But I think it's important that we look at it in the round.
Okay, I think what we'd want to hear, though, certainly what I'd want to hear, Dean, is that as our representative, recognizing the difficulties that is likely to cause, that unless circumstances change fundamentally, that your position is going to be that you want to retain the triple lock to ensure that pensioners don't have to live in that state of poverty. However, I won't say anything more about that.
Yeah. All I would say, though, Clive, it was the Conservative government that brought in the triple lock as part of our manifesto. So I think, you know, of course, I'm very supportive of it, but we have to be realistic about the economic challenges that are there. So I know we're getting into bigger discussions, but, you know, the reason why people want it is because it was the Conservatives that brought it in. But I'm very conscious of not getting into a political discussion, because I think this is more about people on the ground and making sure that they know what's there to support them through very challenging times. And I think that the package of support is pretty big, but there's always more to be done.
I agree with you, Dean, except politics does impact on people's real lives, which is why these things are actually being raised. Because actually, as I say, it doesn't impact so much on me directly, because my income level is such that there's a pain, but it's not to the extreme where I see some people suffering. And I think we really do need to be concerned about that. But let me ask, because I'm going to go to another question, and this is for both you or yourself, because I can't see any specific questions in the chat as yet. I think, Peter, you mentioned the work, and I think you've also mentioned, Dean, the work that charities are doing. I mentioned in my introduction around the impact of the approach to community cohesion that introduced by the Labour government, continued by subsequent government, which is one where it actually is generally penalize charities like ourselves that focus our work on one particular community. And also the way in which I know central government has funded local government, I don't think it has focused enough on enabling the charity sector to actually perform the invaluable function that we do perform. So what do you both say about how and what might need to be done to ensure that the charitable sector can perform, should I say, given the support to perform the function that it is able to? We do what we do primarily through the efforts of our volunteers, and actually we've been struggling for a while, but actually there isn't the kind of funding that used to be around that enables you to support the core of the work as used to be the case. So what do you both say about that?
To go first, I'm happy to. I mean, I would say that if you compare Watford to pretty much any other council in the country, we're extraordinarily generous when it comes to funding of the voluntary and third sector. So that we still have a very large commissioning framework, and when organisations of all types come forward with projects, that we still fund them. For most councils, they've cut back that right to the bone and only deliver statutory services, because in most of the places, lots of councils are delivering social care, for example, and so have just really cut back that. So I don't accept the initial characterisation, the context of the question, Clive. I think that we do still fund a lot of voluntary work, and one of the things, for example, that we've just instigated is our new neighbourhood fund of grants of up to £20,000 for particular neighbourhood projects. And there's a number, I think there's about 10 of those that have been allocated funding that will be announced this week. So I think the days of just having, here you go, here's 50 grand every year for your charity, it doesn't exist anywhere in the country. And Watford Council certainly doesn't have the money to start doing that. But I think I certainly prioritise the voluntary, community and third sector, and make sure that when projects come forward, we work in partnership to deliver on those. I would say that we are in a strong position, again, compared to most places when you actually look at community cohesion, because we have got fantastic organisations like this, but like many others, like the Watford Interfaith Association, a very active One Vision, a number of others. And it's not just, I think I might have said on one of these calls previously, it's not just me that says it. When Hope Not Hate did a report, when they looked at the rise of extremism in places where there's big demographic changes, they highlighted 3 places in the whole country where they said actually there's been a big increase in population, an increase in diversity, but still a sense of unity and cohesion. And the 3 places they picked out in the whole country, I always forget the third, but one of them was Watford and one of them was Milton Keynes. And so there is, there's always work to do on this. And I think actually one of the concerns I have is that in any situation when family budgets are under a lot of pressure, as they are at the moment, there is sadly a human tendency to start, amongst some people, to start blaming others and for there to be more diverse, more kind of animosity between groups. And of course, we've got all the issues at the moment in relation to migration as well added to that. So I think it is a really difficult period, and we've got to all work together as community leaders to make sure that that division doesn't increase, and that we work together through the difficulties of the next few months.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. Dean?
Yeah, I agree, actually. I think Peter and I probably agree on more than we disagree with, which probably doesn't make for very good politics. But I think yeah, I agree. I mean, I think Watford, it's one of those things when you're within Watford and you look around Watford, of course, there's always things that can be improved in terms of charities and community and stuff. But when you look at Watford from the outside, you suddenly realise just how amazing the place is in terms of cohesion. And I think when it comes to charities, there's an awful lot of support there. I mean, even if you take something like gift aid, you know, to make sure that extra funds can go direct to charities. I think we saw it during the COVID pandemic as well, how many charities were getting support through different funding. And also I think we're very, very fortunate when you look at the corporate organisations. I mean, if you take Camelot, you know, I remember when they confirmed the 100 grand support during the COVID pandemic, which actually went through to so many groups, actually through the Mayor's Fund. Actually, I remember when I originally asked them if they'd give some money, and I thought I was asking for a few grand, and then they gave 100, which was amazing. But you know, so we've got incredibly generous and supportive local businesses. Warner Brothers, the work that they do with Leavesden Park, and so many different organisations. You know, I won't name all the different corporates. So I think there's a real sense of that cohesion. Can more be done? Of course, that's always the case. But what I would say is that, again, something that is very close to my heart about mental health is that, for me, the role that volunteering plays to help give people a purpose is incredible. And I think during the pandemic, we saw a lot of people come out to volunteer. And I think that the challenge is that when everyone went back to their day jobs and you know, 9 to 5 and traveling to work every day, that dropped off slightly, but not as much as it could have done. And so I think there's a huge number of volunteers, and I think praising them and appreciating them is really important. And then finally, I think there's an argument about how do we make sure, and I used to, many years ago, used to write for Third Sector magazine, which is a charity trade magazine. So I used to write for them a column for about 5 years. So I used to spend a lot, and I used to work with an awful lot of charities. And one of the challenges, I think, for charities is the risk of competing against each other, where you've got a lot of charities that do very similar things. And so rather than saying, let's work together, they sort of feel that they're trying to fight for the same pound. And I think the key thing to note is that I think what's brilliant in Watford is that even though some charities do similar things, they tend to work together. We've got a really great network. So if you take Small Acts of Kindness, Goods for Good, you know, One Vision was mentioned, you know, Watford Three Rivers Trust, you've got a real list of charities that do different things, but at times there's a crossover. But I like to think that they don't see that crossover as an area for competition, but also more so an area for collaboration. So it's not that I'm disagreeing with you, Clive, because I think there's definitely points you make around how government, local government and community can better support charities. But I do think in Watford, in the wider area, actually in Hertfordshire generally, we're in a pretty good place, but of course there's more to do.
We have some brilliant volunteers within our organization, no doubt about it. My point that neither one of you has really addressed, but I'm not going to dwell on it, is the fact that actually in order for these things to happen is where you need this core funding. Not project funding that you can get for doing this and get for doing that, and you do that project, you move on to the next thing. The whole issue of dealing with race equality, which is a matter here as we're concerned about, isn't a project funded issue. It's an issue that is a long-term issue. The Substantive Race Relations Act goes back to 1976, as people would have heard me talk about many times. And we still have many of the challenges are still with us. So actually, but I recognize also, though, that local government is in a difficult position financially with respect to the kind of settlements that have been provided and the framework that's been provided by central government. But that doesn't detract from the fact that these challenges are still there. But I'll leave it there. Marilyn, you wanted to come in with a question.
Yeah, it was just a quick question about when, for instance, when we were in lockdown, I know there was a moratorium, for example, on people being evicted. So people were not evicted during that time. Given that there is such a crisis in terms of the rising mortgage payments, gas and electricity, cost of living, every time you go into a shop, there's an extra 10p here and 20p there, which doesn't sound like much, but in the whole basket, that's a lot. Any thoughts about protection for people during this time in terms of things like evictions, bailiff orders, those sorts of things? I'd love to just hear if there are any thoughts around that, or if that's beyond the scope of what we're talking about here today.
I don't think it's beyond the scope, Marilyn. It's about cost of living. That's what it's about. So who wants to come in?
I think let me. Oh, sorry, Peter. Do you want to?
I was just going to say, I mean, in Watford, so from the council's perspective, it's a really important issue, Marilyn. I think sometimes because we refer to it as council houses, people think that Watford Borough Council is directly responsible for Watford community housing properties and the decisions. Of course, they're an independent organisation, but we are having conversations with them because it's not in anyone's interest to see lots of people being removed from the houses when they've got difficult financial circumstances. So we want to be as compassionate as possible. The number of people in temporary accommodation in Watford, a few years ago, we had well over 200 families in temporary accommodation. We managed to bring that right down to about 80. It's now up to just under 100. But it's not good for anybody. It's certainly not good for the families, but it's not good for taxpayers actually to have families in temporary accommodation. And so trying to avoid that. I know that the CAB do a heck of a lot of work, the tenancy support team at New Hope. There is lots of support for people who are struggling to pay rents to try to make sure that that is avoided, and it's always a last resort. So it is a very important point, and I know that there's a lot of work, as I say, that the council does, the CAB, New Hope and others, to try to make sure that evictions are avoided whenever possible.
Yeah. And from a government perspective, in all honesty, I'd need to get back to you on where things are at, because I know there was a lot of work done in terms of not just during the pandemic, but also looking at how to protect tenants. So I wouldn't want to give you the wrong information, because weirdly enough, I've been looking to it quite a lot recently because of some casework we've been doing. And so I almost know too much in terms of what was there and what isn't. But it's a really great point. I think there's a need, but there's also an understanding of how it plays through the system, that you've got people who are leaseholders and who rent out properties, and how that plays through the system, where if somebody, you wouldn't want anyone to be put on the streets. And I personally have helped people through casework to stop that happening. So they can never go into detail of these things. The other thing I would say, though, that I'm very proud of in Watford is also tackling things like rough sleeping, where people have gone out on the streets. I mean, in Watford, I'm proud that I fought to get, I think we've had about £4.5 million from government so far to end rough sleeping. We've got no rough sleepers at the moment, and that then has been delivered on the ground by fantastic teams at the council, New Hope, One YMCA. I remember during the pandemic making sure that we had rooms in Travelodge, which were funded so that rough sleepers go in there. So it's something I'm very mindful of, and you wouldn't want the stress of someone being worried that they're not going to have a home. And I know the council work very closely with my team. I know Peter and my team work together where there are issues. And so again, to anyone on this Zoom, if they are worried about anything like that, do get in touch. I'm wary of saying about policy stuff, because I am aware of a couple of things that I know have been talked about a lot, but I just want to make sure I don't give the wrong information out. But I'll gladly follow up with you and perhaps share with you, Clive, to share more widely as well.
Yes, please do. I've got one question that I need to get your thoughts, probably, Dean. I don't know if Peter's got any views on this either, but an issue that's occurred to some of us living in the Garston area recently is that I got a letter from my dentist saying that I'm being kicked off. They're no longer accepting NHS patients.
Yeah.
So I'd have to go private or find myself another dentist. I know you mentioned dentistry initially when you made your presentation. Do you know what the government, I've been with my dentist for 30 years and all of a sudden this is happening. Do you know what the government position is on this? And where am I going to find my next dentist?
It's an incredibly important point. I mean, there's a government bit, which is the ABCD initiative, ambulances, then went down to the D, which is dentists, doctors, dentists. In all honesty, Clive, I'm planning on raising this next week, and whether I'll get to be able to ask it in Parliament, but it is a concern. In fact, back when there was an issue with GPs, I think I was the first MP that I'm aware of, at least, I'm hopefully not misleading, but the first MP to raise the fact that people weren't being able to access their GPs in person in Parliament. I raised it to the Secretary of State, and then within a few colleagues raised the same. And actually, I don't know if you remember, there was a lot of stuff in the news last year about GP surgeries and not being able to get face-to-face appointments. That was in part sparked by me raising it in Parliament and on the Health Select Committee. So it's something I'm very mindful of. And with dentists, I'm hearing some really terrible stories of like kids being charged to go and see a dentist and so on. So I am aware. This is one where, as a constituency MP, I'm going to be raising it through official channels to find out what's going on and speaking to the dentists that are doing it. The honest answer is I don't know at the moment what the government can do. It's not because I don't know that they are doing something. It's just I don't know what the mechanism is. But for me, I don't think it's right that people like yourself who've been with the dentist for a long period of time should not be able to continue doing that. So I don't know the answer, in all honesty, but it's something that I'm raising. I will be raising, and I'm going to be raising both within government and also with the dentist to try and find out what's going on.
And Dean, it's overall, when you think about the situation where we're talking about whether people are going to be able to eat some food or heat their building. Now, there's also a question, am I going to be able to look after my child's teeth, never mind my I mean, what we see is a situation, we talk about cost of living. My dentist is talking about anything from 13 to 20 plus pounds just to inspect my teeth. That's not to do the work. I can remember the days when you could go to your dentist and there wasn't a charge at all. You know,
Yeah.
now it seems like an input, like everything else, when you talk about cost of living, that you're talking about people with inflation are having a reduction in their income, are having an increase in the number of costs that they're incurring. And I think this is something that really we do need to think about how we're going to address these multitude of things that are impacting on people's financial well-being.
Absolutely, and I say I take it very, very seriously, actually, because it is important. Because actually, dental health, I learned a lot about this on the Select Committee, Health Select Committee. Dental health can have a lot of impacts on wider health, and also can be a early warning sign for serious health conditions as well. So I'm with you on this. I think we need to make sure we understand what's going on, but also make sure we've got more dentists. One thing I would say is when I raised all of the issues around GPs, in Watford, we have some amazing GPs. I ended up spending 4 hours down at the Bridgewater GP surgery because they were quite annoyed that I'd raised this fact that some GP surgeries weren't open. They said, well, we're open, and I spent time with them, looked at how they do the call center for their organisation, saw behind the scenes, saw the challenges, and I think they welcomed, I know they welcomed me going down. So I think, but what I learned through that was some of the challenges around training and the length of time and whether there's ways to adapt that and so on. So there's often a multitude of reasons, but even so, for me, I don't think it's right that that's happening, and I'll look into it and I'm going to try and raise it as best I can.
And Peter, just briefly, I don't know if you know this, but do we, anybody actually, do we know whether there is any maintained list where you'd be able to establish where there are any NHS dentists operating?
I happen to know, Clyde, and the reason I know is that I got struck off by my dentist. Is that the same thing happened to me about a year ago in Bushy? And so you have to phone up, I think it's the NHS general phone number, I'm trying to remember what it is now, and you wait forever because one of the selections is about dentists, and then they tell you which are the ones locally who are accepting NHS patients. The issue that you've raised about the dentist up in Garston, I've already had families contact me because my understanding is they're being asked to pay £7 a month per person in order to stay on their
for children.
Yeah, exactly. So for children, and you think, well, families with the number of children right at the moment when there's all the cost of living stuff is a huge issue. I spent yesterday evening at Watford General shadowing the Hertfordshire Mind team who are doing great work. And one of the things that struck me was there's huge pressure on A&E already. And actually, if people can't access dental health, then what happens is more people will end up going with dental issues to A&E on an already really stretched, have unintended consequences and put pressure on the system elsewhere. So I hope Dean is effective and successful in his lobbying, because I think it's just storing up more and more problems for the future, actually, if we don't get a grip of it.
Thank you both. I think I can't see any more questions. So
I think Valerie had her hand up.
oh yes, so sorry, Valerie. Yes, yes, Valerie, come in.
She has to be unmuted.
It's about the same topic, because my my daughter and her child have also been well, they've been told that they, by the end of the year, they either need to sign up to a contract, and for a 3-year-old it is £7.50, as Peter's just said. That's what I wanted to pick up on, that it's £7.50 a month, £90 a year for a checkup, you know, every 6 months for a 3-year-old. It's outrageous. But one thing I did want to know was whether the, you know, obviously the government used to give the dentist a certain amount of funds for checkups and things, because we haven't always paid for checkups, as Clive was rightly saying, we haven't always paid. And so I don't know if that no longer covers the cost, because that's what the owner of the dentistry is saying, is that she cannot get dentists to work for her because she can't pay them as much as they're requesting, because the government's not doing the funding that they used to or should do, or
Sure.
increase
Let me look into it. What I would say, actually, I don't know, Clive and Valerie, I think you're both in my constituencies. I'm your constituency MP.
Yes, yes.
But I assume, yeah, I thought that's the case. So if you want to write to me, because it helps me then when I raise it into. So if you could write to me, one weird thing, just so that you know, as an MP, I have to have your home address, so I have to know that you live within the constituency. So if you write to me, you're happy to include your home address and just send your details of what the issue is. It just helps me, because then when I raise this with ministers, I can try and find out what the deal is and what's being done as well.
Yeah, and Valerie's daughter is also in the constituency, so we're all in the constituency. So,
Fantastic.
okay.
I must admit, I'm not. My dentist is in Bushy, and luckily I'm still with him after, I don't know, about 40 years. So
perhaps you took Peter's place in the joking.
Okay, look, I'm conscious that time is moving on. And some people haven't said anything at all. I kind of just wanted to sound people out to see if people had any ideas about what we might need to do to ensure that people are sufficiently well supported. So has anyone got any suggestions as to things that we could do directly as a collection of people, or that we could be pushing the council to do, or we could be engaging with Dean to make sure that he knows that if he's not doing what we want, that he's going to get a big boot up his rear end or anything like that. So
I know that already, Clive, I have to say.
So has anyone oh, somebody's looking at NHS dentists. So I think is someone waiting to come in. Does anyone have any thoughts about what might make a difference? What can we do? Because actually, I think this conversation so far has indicated that there's a problem that is pretty serious for a lot of members of our community. And if you are the statistics indicate from our community, we might personally be in an okay position, but I'm never happy unless we're in a position where, as far as possible, everyone is in a good position.
Well, Clive, you've got one of the young voices waiting to come in. Khadija has raised her hand.
Yes, Khadija.
Hi, I just want to say this has been such a great conversation, and it's really kind of got me thinking about spreading the word and that outreach, which is, I guess, the question that you're asking, Clive. And I've actually just gone on to like try and start spreading things on social media and places that I know that I personally could reach people, but it just doesn't seem as user-friendly as I would like. So I don't know. I know maybe it's the wrong thing to be thinking about, but like, how are we reaching people in a quick, easy way where people can get those messaging? And I like the fact, not like the fact, but this is a pervasive issue, and it's not something that people should feel shame for. So yeah, I want to get that out there for sure.
Absolutely, Khadija. That's a good suggestion, and it's a young people's medium. So I think we're going to call on you to to maximize the use of that. Yeah, because I think it's all of our responsibility. I mean, I believe that if my brother has a problem, then I have a problem. So we need to think about it in those kinds of ways. And any other thoughts that people have? So using social media.
Well, I'm not, she didn't raise her hand, but I'm just going to check, because I know last time we missed Perline because she said she was waving her hand. So Perline, I just want to make sure and see if there's anything you wanted to say so we do not miss you out today.
I did have a question which I had to send through, but that was to do with the winter fuel money, because someone wanted to know if is the £600 per household, or if there are people sharing accommodation, how is it distributed?
I think there was an answer in there that said it was there an answer saying it was per household? Tony, Tony, do you want to come in and answer that question, because we'd like to see you, because I don't know who Tony is. I presume he works for the council. Is he still with us? Tony? Is he? Oh,
Yeah, Tony is at the top there. I can see Tony. I don't know which Tony is.
Tony is.
He's muted.
You're muted.
Maybe
Tony,
that's why. No, you need to take it off, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you're not a co-host, you can't unmute yourself.
I've done it, sir. I've asked him to unmute.
Yeah.
Tony. Oh. Is it there? What's that? Where's he going?
He's there.
He is unmuted, but I can't hear. I can see he's talking, but I can't hear anything, unfortunately. So Tony, for some reason, it may not be picking up your microphone.
So let me just say
Right. Can I come in, Clive?
Yes, yes, Angela.
Right. The 600 is per household, and you have to be born before the 25th of September 1942, and it's per household.
Now, it's 1956, Angela. Sorry,
No. 100 has to be born before the 25th of September 1942.
Yes.
Yeah,
and it is per household.
Yeah, okay. But I think if you are retired, you also, if you're over 66, you're also entitled to the 500 per house.
You're gonna get no household is gonna get 600 and 500. Whoever is in the household, let's say the partner is 60, has been born before 25th September 1942. 600, he would get, the household will get a total of 600, because that is as household, it's not each.
Yeah.
Okay, so the reason I say that is, well, maybe it's something else, but
it's the winter fuel, Clive.
Yes, that's what we're talking about.
You're talking about the winter fuel.
Is that what I'm talking about?
Yes.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I got mine.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay,
what I know.
So I need to find my paperwork.
No, we're talking about the £600, Clive, not the 500.
Okay.
The £600 that senior citizens get for winter fuel.
Right.
And if it's just that it was, I said, it's per household, because somebody said they're on their own and they got £600.
That's right.
So I said, yes, that's right. But then because somebody else said they got 300 and the next person got 300, I said, because it's two of them sharing the accommodation, it's £600 per household. I just wanted to confirm that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, I think my confusion is that I've just received some communication that says that I'm getting £250, and as I'm now 66, and my wife has also got the same communications to get £250, which amounts
So
to
that's £500
that's
per
the
household.
500.
the question though is as a broader context. If, for example, there is two households living in the same property, you know, there are two different family, does anyone know how that works?
Two different families living in the same household.
Yes.
They're
in the
not
same,
going
in the same property. So,
The sa-
so you
well-
might be renting a room, and you got your child as well as the family that lives there ordinarily. So, but you're not part of the same family, but you're living in the same property.
you are not going to get double payment there.
Mm-mm.
It's counted as one household.
Okay, so I think that's part of the question that was being asked.
Yeah.
Whether or not, so it's clear. One property is one household, however many families might live in it, I think is the answer to the question.
Clive, can I just say something else too? Talking about people in need, there are people that I have spoken to, and I have, because speaking to Angela and her wisdom that she enlighten us every week about different matters, and I try to share it. And I said to someone, you know, you should look into certain things, and I'm sure you're entitled to it. And this is an 86-year-old person, one of them, and she said, because these people are so rude, the way when you go to them, they make you feel as if they are begging. And this is what I want to say to Peter, or the people who are going to knock on doors. You'll find that there are people who they are in need, but they're quite resentful about sharing their circumstances. And they just feel that, you know, at the end of the day, they're being belittled.
Yeah.
And it's just the people who are dealing with it, how they approach it. I'm sure Angela has met that with people who are reluctant to come forward, and they are struggling. And I mean, struggling with not putting on the heat, because I'm saying you shouldn't be in the cold, but they don't want to put the heating on.
Okay.
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
Pauline? You are advised to put your heating on. The energy company has a duty to work with you. People going for support to the CAB, there are lots of voluntary groups out there that would assist. And indeed, sometimes you can get so much of it wiped off just depending on your circumstances. The help is there, but we've got to go and get it. And we tend to stay aside and think it's going to come to us. It's not going to come to us. Go out there and get it. Claim you've worked in the country, you lived here, you go out there. This is what's happening. I haven't got it. This is that. They will do a benefit check, and they will seek as much help as they possibly can. But even Age Concern has asked you not to stay in the cold and get ill. You need to keep warm. And the sooner people go out there and inquire and see what's available, they will check, they'll do a benefit check, and they would do, there's a big folder, voluntary, 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 and they would look to see where they can help, and help is there, I can assure you.
Thank you very much. Conscious
Thank you,
of time,
Angela.
it's now 20 past, and just to say that we have got a session that we're organizing for the 9th of December, which is specifically to look at this point that I know Khadijah's made a contribution to, which is what we're calling financial well-being. What are some of the practical solutions that we can identify to ensure that we can maintain our well-being? Because actually financial worries often end up in lots of other worries that people are having to deal with. So, and I know that for a start from my life, as we go through life, there are these challenges that are out there. So we will put a link, if you've not already got it, to that session that will be on the 9th of December, where we are going to look at, particularly since this would have been after the Chancellor's introduces new mini budget, and we will know what the challenges that presents to us. We will be having that session on the 9th of December. So if you've not already got an invite, you should get one soon. And if you put your details in the chat, we'll make sure you're invited to that. But as we try to wind down, I will also say that just thinking about some of the things that we could say, the association, of course, particularly if you're new on this forum, is your association. Please do join in some of the activities. We have a 50+ activities that take place on a Wednesday between 11:30 and 2:30 in the afternoon. We have our Tribe Youth Project that operates on a Monday. We have our sickle cell initiative. And of course, we have these and other mechanisms that we've got in place to try and make sure that we can support each other. Having said all of that, we of course are always looking for volunteers to support these activities. For example, you could help to contribute to our newsletter. You could help us to fundraise. You could help us to share some of the skills and experience that you do have. And for example, if you go to our 50+, you see people sharing their flower craft skill, their baking skills, and all kinds of other skills that they have. Because as you see with our motto, together we can achieve. We also have, of course, our community WhatsApp page that people can become a part of. And of course, ultimately, donation has been mentioned. We're an organization that we're always looking for the kind of support that will help us to sustain what we're doing, because the key for us is being able to be in a position where we can sustain our activities. We are in a position where currently we can sustain the things that we're doing now, but we'd like to do more, and we need to make that more sustainable. So that's kind of unless there are any other observations, I'm going to try and ask our speakers to share any final thoughts following the conversation we've had so far. I'm going to start with you, Angela, and say, do you have any final thoughts from what's been said today that you want to share with us before we close?
Well, I think we both Peter and Dean has really given us a lot of information, and that we have to go forward and do the best we can. Just continue to work and help people, and do the best we can to help the community and to look out for one another, because coming this season of winter, we don't know what it's going to be like, and with things as they are, we need to really care and look out for each other.
Yeah.
And that's the most we can do. And to information which I do pass on to people where to get help and what's available and what can be done, as much information I can do. And people who have got that information, they can continue to do that in order so that we can all be looked after and live, a life that is healthy and the best we can, really comfortable.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. I started with you, Dean, but I'm going to end with Peter. So Dean, final words.
Just a huge thank you, really, and thanks to you, Clive, and everyone for organising this evening and for inviting me to speak and joining the great guests you've had. But the main 3 points from me: one is, don't be ashamed to ask for help. If you need support, ask for it early. It's often easier to get support and the right sort of support when it's asked for early rather than wait till you absolutely need it. Second one is, let people know that help is out there, and then signpost them to where to get it. Check on your friends, check on your neighbours. Just because they might have a big, nice car out front doesn't mean that they're not struggling behind the closed doors. And then the third one is, there is an awful lot of stuff out there that's available. And as was mentioned earlier by Perline and by Angela, especially did a brilliant outline of what's there, especially with Citizens Advice Bureau. there is a lot of support available. There's a lot of different funds. There's a lot of different grants. There's a lot of different mechanisms. So don't feel embarrassed about asking about them. And if you've been paying your taxes all your life, then especially if you're a pensioner, you should take advantage of the funds that are there. And especially, I think Peter raised a brilliant point about pension credits. Make sure that you take advantage of those. But I'll leave it there, other than just a massive thank you for inviting us.
Thank you very much, Dean. Peter?
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure to join you all. Good to see lots of familiar faces. I would like to thank you, of course, Clive, and especially Angela. I think that the CAB in Watford do, fantastic work. And as Angela said, a lot of volunteers, though, put in hours and hours for decades in some cases. And it's easy to forget that, of course, the CAB is a charity and actually relies on donations. My Christmas card this year, actually, which is sponsored by local businesses, £5,000 of that will go to the CAB, because I think it's easy to forget that they need financial support as well. I think Perline made a really excellent point about the way that we have these conversations about being non-judgmental and being open and kind of honest. And I think it's obviously there's been lots of information tonight about the financial support that's out there, but there's knock-on consequences of this. We're seeing an increase in domestic abuse. We're seeing impacts on mental health. So I think in those conversations that we're having with people, it might not just be that they're struggling to pay for their food and fuel, but actually there's pressures on lots of people and circumstances and families, and being alert to that is quite helpful at the moment. So thanks again, and really appreciate this evening's event.
Thank you very much. And before we finish, just want to invite Marilyn, my co-host with this meeting. And just to say about Marilyn, she's a councillor, just for the record, but actually she's a very active member of WACA. That's the reason why she's here doing what she's doing this evening. Marilyn, did you have any final thoughts?
For a change? No, I just want to say it's been a really good, informative session. Definitely the whole thing around the stigma and the mental health side is really key. I think that's almost like the iceberg. We're seeing the tip of the iceberg now. There's all the things that are happening underneath that, which are so important, and it's easy to put your head in the sand. And I say that as someone who did that 10, 15 years ago, when it first happened to me. And as Dean was saying, I waited until it was almost back against the wall, because it was really embarrassing, because as Perline picked up, you don't want people in your business. So I would definitely say if there's somebody you can talk to, that's always a really good thing. Click on some of those links on the website. Myself and Peter have shared that several times. Do take up the offer from Dean to send him an email about the dental and all of that, because I think one of the ways that you get through this is by doing what you can to take charge of the situation and making the most of things that are available. But just thank you to Peter Taylor, thank you to Dean, and thank you, Clive, for organising, and thank you to everyone for joining and for your questions. So I'll leave it there. Back to you, Clive.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. And first of all, thanks everybody for joining. We hope that you found this useful. But finally, we know that you're both very busy. So thank you, Dean and Peter, for sharing your valuable time with us this evening. And you would have gathered that this is clearly not the end of a conversation. It's a conversation is going to continue. And my final word would be, certainly the association, your association, join us on the 9th of December, when we're going to pick up on this financial well-being issue, which touches on a whole host of other things, as Marilyn has said. A lot of issues, mental, physical, can emanate from the challenges that some of the financial difficulties that we face can amount to. So thank you very much, everybody. It is past. It's when we're scheduled to finish. So good for me. I seem to have finished the meeting on time. So have a good evening, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, let's stop the recording now.
Yeah.